What's going on, everyone? Put first things first. That is the title of today's episode. That is the subject we're going into. That is habit number 3 of the 7 habits of highly effective people. And I got to tell you guys, this is probably my favorite chapter. I don't know if it's definitely my favorite chapter. I always say kind of habits 1, 3, and 7 are probably my favorites. But there's a certain piece of framework we're going to get into today that is housed within this chapter that I just absolutely love. It's one of my favorite things I've ever learned from a self-help book. I think it's one of there's several things in here actually that are key to seeking excellence once again. And I'm just really excited for today's episode. I think it very well may end up being a long one because there's just so much goodness contained within this chapter. And so excited to get into this. Now, the kind of subtitle for this chapter, habit number 3, put first things first, is that these are principles of personal management. And so you remember, as I've said before, that there's kind of the private victories and the public victories is how he breaks down, habits 1 through 3, habits 4 through 6. And then you have habit 7 that kind of circles around all of them and helps to maintain a certain level of excellence, a certain level of, personal effectiveness. And so the opening quote from today from this chapter is, "Things which matter most must never be at the mercy of things which matter least." And I mean, dude, how important is that? How key is that? Talking about a life of excellence, talking about the 7 pillars of excellence, talking about how we need to prioritize the pillars, right? Because even though we talk about having this kind of report card mentality or approach to our success in life with this life of excellence, living a well-rounded life, we recognize that even within that not all of the classes are necessarily weighed the same, right? They're not all weighted on the same scale. They're not all, have the same power or influence in our lives, right? So at the end of the day, if I have to sacrifice, the financial pillar for the sake of the spiritual pillar, that's a good trade-off. The idea of seeking excellence is that we can't just totally negate and ignore the financial pillar of our lives and expect to be excellent or amazing human beings or to be successful in the end, or recognizing that God doesn't call us to do that. God doesn't call us to just totally forsake being remotely intentional in our financial lives for the sake of just constantly praying, right? There's a certain practical aspect to our holiness and to building a life of virtue. And so just to give a little recap here, I really like this recap he gives at the beginning. He says, habit 3 is the personal fruit, the practical fulfillment of habits 1 and 2. Habit 1 says, quote, "You're the creator, you are in charge," end quote. It's based on the 4 unique human endowments of imagination, conscience, independent will, and particularly self-awareness. It empowers you to say, "That's an unhealthy program I've been given from my childhood, from my social mirror. I don't like that ineffective script. I can change." That's what habit 1 says. Going on, he says habit 2 is the first or mental creation. It's based on imagination, the ability to envision, to see the potential, to create with our minds what we cannot at present see with our eyes. And conscience, the ability to detect our own uniqueness, the personal, moral, and ethical guidelines within which we can most happily fulfill it. So that gives you kind of an overview of how the 3 kind of go together. This one, I think, it really is. I like the description there that this is the fruit of the first 2 habits. And the reason why I like that so much is that habit number 3 is, I think, in a sense, the most practical. Where habit number 1, I think, is really about your attitude and your approach towards your success in life, your approach towards who you are as a person. Habit number 2 is like he said, is about the imagination. To me, that's really about the vision. And then habit 3 is what allows you to really execute on that, right? To execute that vision. And so I love one of the first things he gives here is he talks about um, the things of a successful person does. And so this is something that I think we don't like to think of holiness as success, right? But to me, when I'm reading these self-help books and I've been to conferences and been to different things that kind of focus on success or personal growth, what is success in life other than getting to heaven? And so don't you think that some of these principles of success, when people talk about success, motivational speakers, things like that, aren't they Aren't the tips towards getting towards the goal, to achieving the goal, to getting from here to there, and understanding the human brain, the human physiology, our physical realities, our psychological realities, isn't understanding how to achieve a goal and understanding all those things and how they can contribute towards your achievement of a goal. I think it's all helpful, right? I don't understand why people seem to be so off put by this idea of success. I remember, this is something I've been thinking about recently, and I kind of wanted to write about it, and I think I might write about it this week actually. I was thinking about this randomly listening to Jordan Peterson walking my dog this morning. The quote from Pope Benedict XVI, and I think, and before I get into the quote, I want to share I think a lot of you are going to resonate with this, just as people who listen to Seeking Excellence. I think we're a small community of people who apply faith and reason to everyday life and want to make the most of our lives, who want to fulfill our potential. And for me, there's this quote from Pope Benedict XVI that I think has become somewhat of a cliche and is shared a lot of times by public speakers. You read it in a lot of books. It's very inspirational. And the quote says, "The world offers you comfort, but you were not made for comfort. You were made for greatness." And there's probably more around that quote. It obviously wasn't a standalone sentence that he said. So there's more context to give to it, of course. But the thing that always kind of got me about that quote is, I feel like when I asked the question, what is greatness? Or if you said, okay, I want to be great. If I'm made for greatness and I want to be great, I want greatness. It seems like in the church today, we view that type of ambition as a bad thing. And just the statement, I want to be great, does not have to be inherently prideful. It does not have to inherently mean I just want to be a billionaire, right? I just want to have a ton of money. I think we have this mistake where we think that whatever the world defines as great, when we say we want to be great, we want to be that. But you can actually define greatness on your own terms. You can actually form your definition of greatness based on the reality of church teaching, of eternal truth, of goodness and virtue and holiness. And if if that is your definition of greatness, shouldn't you pursue it? And shouldn't you pursue it relentlessly? Shouldn't you pursue it with the same effort and determination and dedication that Kobe pursued being the best basketball player he could be, that Tom Brady pursued being the best quarterback that he could be? If we do these things, if we learn from these athletes, these people who have achieved greatness in their own way, can't we then take that and apply it to our own lives? And we can obviously emulate and model our lives after the saints who have done that. But sometimes I think we can also draw from other areas of life, from other things. And we can also recognize that maybe pursuing greatness as a layperson is not solely spiritual. Maybe it does require, if I'm going to be truly great, maybe I do strive to be a great person at my job. Maybe it means I strive to be a great husband and father. Maybe it means I strive to be great with my budgeting. And I try to be great with my understanding of the impact I have as a citizen in my community and how I can impact my community, and understanding politics and economics and all these different aspects of human life that actually lead to human flourishing, that are outside the realms of theology and philosophy. If I can understand that, then maybe I can shape what I think greatness is, which to me, and I'm sure to many of you now, is the life of excellence. It's the 7 pillars. And so if that's our striving for greatness, then we ought to learn what successful people do. We ought to try to emulate it, whether that's getting up early or it's cold plunges, whatever it might be. Some of these crazy kind of hacks that people are having, there's a lot of kooky and weird stuff out there, and we have to be careful not to go into, spiritually dangerous territory in this. But just with some of the things, that are just kind of proven practices, whether that's just daily reading or listening to positive things, surrounding yourself with positive people, setting up boundaries, things that don't necessarily come from Catholic theology books. We can learn a lot from other areas of life. And I know you've already heard me say that a little bit, but I just wanted to share that as I get into this quote here, because it talks about the successful person. And I think I just really hate this mindset we have as Catholics that we are trying to avoid success. I want to be successful. I want to be successful in my marriage. I want to be successful in my pursuit of my physical fitness goals. I want to be successful, generally speaking, which I think requires me being successful intellectually, which for me is just constantly learning and gaining the knowledge and wisdom I need to be great in life. But I think when we hear that quote, let's not just write it off as a cliche, but let's also not take this kind of Catholic approach to it, where we just like, I feel like it's just always said at like conferences where you get really rah hoot like hyped up, and then you just have no idea what that actually means. And I just get super frustrated by that, because I think we as a church, I don't say the church to be third person. I think that we as the church fail to really form people and tell people what greatness is as a lay person. And so I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're listening to this. If this is your first episode of Seeking Excellence, this is what you can expect. Is we're going to talk about human greatness. We're going to talk about human greatness in the form of excellence, and what that really looks like for your life as an individual. And there's going to be ways that you have to tailor it and fit, kind of fit it into your life and your schedule, your situation. But there's going to be universal things that are going to apply to all of us. And so I think taking the universal truth and kind of tailoring it to your life is what we try to do here. And that's what I think you always have to do. Is you can read books like this, just like you can read The Imitation of Christ. And at the beginning of that, one of my favorite quotes from any Catholic book is, when you hear the way of the perfect, do not be detoured, but rather be inspired to strive. And this isn't an exact quote. Be inspired to strive for perfection yourself. Right. And that's what we have to do. When you hear about all these different things, there's all these different hacks, I'm just inspired by it to say, okay, what can I implement in my life this week and try to get 1% better this week? How can I get 3% better this month? And just make these gradual improvements by including different things, different aspects, whether that's, again, cold showers, or waking up early, or going to the gym at a certain time of day, or not eating after a certain time, or controlling my screen time, right? There's a lot of secular wisdom and knowledge out there that can inform how we apply the internal wisdom and truth that we receive from the church to our lives in the modern day, and how we can be most effective. So this quote from the book, this comes from E.M. Gray, who is the author of The Common Denominator of Success. He says, the successful person has the habit of doing things failures don't like to do. Continuing on, he says, they don't like doing them either necessarily, but their disliking is subordinated to the strength of their purpose. I thought this was absolutely fire. I remember how much this impacted me as a young soldier, because remember, when I read this book, I was like new in the Army. I think I'd already gone to Ranger School, but that just gave me even more fuel to my fire to recognize and understand this reality, right? Why did I succeed at Ranger School? Some people who fail Ranger School say you're successful at Ranger School because of luck. Now, luck is undoubtedly a part of Ranger School. I think you have to be somewhat lucky, right? There's a certain aspect of luck. I know some people used to say that Ranger School was 1/3 dependent on you, 1/3 dependent on your team, and 1/3 dependent on luck. And so there is some aspect of luck that's there. You also kind of have to be lucky to get on a good team, right? To be on a good squad, to be in a good platoon. But there's still some aspect of personal responsibility. And the reality is, I will never forget being in pre-Ranger. This is before we even got to Ranger School, where I had to do, I think it was like 16, 17 days of pre-Ranger. I did RTAC, if you're in the Army, down at Fort Benning, which is like the National Guard pre-Ranger course. And it was a bitch, man. It was so cold. I remember I had to do it twice. So I did it in January and then in February. So you can kind of tell I was not crushed and I wasn't your superstar soldier. But I did this pre-Ranger, and I'll never forget, it was the first time I went through it in January, and we had laid down for land navigation. Now, when you're doing land navigation in the Army, you almost always go early in the morning, 2, 3 a.m., because they want to give you, it's usually like an 8-hour course, 6-hour course, something like that. And it's supposed to be night into day. Sometimes you'll do day into night, but usually it's night into day, because they want to make it kind of limit your light time, your time with the daylight, and make it more difficult, right? It's hard to navigate in the woods at night with no night vision. And so you're just out there. It's a time, man. It was kind of enjoyable. I always kind of enjoyed it. I wasn't amazing at it, but I was good at it, I would say, typically. And this particular day, it was really, really cold. And we laid down to plot our points. We haven't even left yet. This is like the first 30 minutes before you even, I don't remember if they start your time. They typically start your time when they give you your map, or they give you your grid coordinates. And so you're like laying down to plot your points. And I'll never forget, this guy just quit right there. It was kind of like misting. It wasn't raining. But this is, it was bad, right? It's like 40 some degrees and it's like kind of like lightly raining. And so you can just think like, oh man, we're in for a long day. And we were, man. That RTAC freaking course is a pain in the ass. And so we lay down and this guy just quits next to me. And what did he quit for? He didn't quit because he couldn't find his points. He didn't quit because it was too difficult. He didn't quit because they were yelling at him. He just simply wasn't willing to endure the cold. And this is not an uncommon thing. This is why a lot of people quit, why a lot of people leave Ranger School, is just because of the pain. You're going to experience some pretty serious pain when you're in Ranger School. And so this is, I think, this is the kind of things I flash back to when I think about this. Quote, the successful person has the habit of doing things failures don't like to do. They don't like doing them either necessarily. Dude, I didn't want to be out there. I wanted to go home. They're always tempting you. The Ranger instructors are always tempting you, saying, hey, we got coffee and donuts back at the place. Like, we'll give you some pizza. We'll give you whatever. They're trying to, you're hungry, you're tired, you're wet, you're cold. And so they want to kind of coax you back and kind of try to convince you to quit. And that's just the reality of the game. That's kind of the mind games they want to play. They want to screw with you. And some people let them win. Some people let them into their mind and allow them to affect their attitude, affect their commitment. And it's not that other people who are successful in a lot of these areas of life and the things that they're doing want to do these harder things. They don't necessarily want to take the harder path, but they're willing to subordinate that to make it less important, right? On the scale of weighing their options, you can take into consideration that you're uncomfortable, that you're tired, that you don't know how to do this new thing that you're trying to do, whether that's prayer or going to the gym or whatever. But the reality is this. Think about the gym. This is another good example. Going to the gym, I know a lot of people who try to start going to the gym, but they get uncomfortable because they don't know what to do when they're there. And so eventually they just kind of fizzle out. The reality is that all of us have that point at some point in our lives. I remember I used to tell people this when I would give talks back when I was in the Army, is when I got into the Army, I didn't know how, even my first year and a half, 2 years almost in the Army, I didn't know how to back squat. I didn't know how to deadlift. I didn't know how to do a lot of these things. All I did when I was back home was upper body stuff. So we were doing bench press, shoulder press, curls, some of the machines. Like, that was what my dad had taught me to do. He never really taught me how to do anything with my legs. He had really bad knees. So when he took me to the gym, which was very rare that we even worked out together, but when we did, we only did I don't remember doing anything other than like bench press and things like that, some of the machines. So when I get down to Fort Benning, I'm in good shape, but I'm in good kind of like Army shape, right? Like, I'm not really like an athlete. I'm not really jacked at this point. And so I'll never forget, man, going to Audie Murphy Gym and seeing these just freaks, dude. And I'm seeing machines and things like that I don't even know how to use. I've never seen a bumper plate before in my life. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. And I'm looking at these guys and I'm like, I'm intimidated, right? Because they're all jacked. They're all in much better shape than I am. They're doing things that I don't even know how to do functionally. And so it's intimidating. Did I stop going? No. I tried to use that as inspiration to say, hey, I had some friends. Ted Delacath was one of my friends who was a freak athlete, knew how to do all these things. And you ask him, hey, can you show me how to do this? Can you teach me how to do this? It takes humility. But these are the things that we forget, right? Because when you are somebody that thinks only about theology, you think that the only time you need humility in order to grow in your life is before God directly, right? But the reality is that humility needs to be applied to every area of your life. You're going to have a pretty tough marriage if you're not humble. You're going to have a pretty tough time at work if you're not humble. You're going to have a pretty tough time going to the gym and figuring out new exercises if you're not humble. You're going to have a tough time reading and learning and asking questions of people who might know more than you if you're not humble, right? And it obviously applies to your spiritual life and evangelization, all these different areas. But we kind of forget that these opportunities to be humbled, these opportunities to be uncomfortable, they allow us to grow in virtue. And so you have to think in your own life. Again, I kind of shared this already with Begin with the End in Mind, and I don't know, some podcasts I did recently where I talked about the fact that, like, I look at people who are growing on social media, and if they're doing work that I'm not doing, I can't be mad that they have results that I don't have. And so the same thing goes in your life, and you have to think. There's two reasons. If you're not successful in your life, right, and that could be in your relationship, it could be financially, it could be professionally, it could be spiritually, whatever. It's one of two things. Either you don't know what to do, and so you need to ask someone or seek out wisdom and help, or two, you know what to do and you're not doing it. Those are really the only two options. And so if you think about this quote and you apply this to your life, the successful person is willing to do the things unsuccessful people are not willing to do. If you are unsuccessful in whatever you're endeavoring to do, what are you not doing that successful people are willing to do? This is something I'm constantly evaluating this in myself. I think about the podcast. I think about all these different things. Even I told you before, I've kind of modeled myself or given myself my timeline based on the Order of Man podcast with Ryan Michler. Now, I recently found out some things about Ryan Michler that make me not want to model some of my other areas of life after him, but I still think as a content creator, as a podcaster, his journey is helpful for me, just contextualizing where I am in my own journey. And I had to think to myself earlier before I did, some of these equipment upgrades. I had to say, hey, all the podcasters who ended up making it, who ended up being successful and growing a large podcasting audience, they eventually had to invest in better equipment. And it doesn't mean you have to put 10 grand in out of the gate, right? Or right off the bat. But it does mean that I can't keep dilly-dallying around thinking I'm going to use, a $20 microphone and my laptop camera, my FaceTime camera, as the tools that are going to get me to the next level, right? At a certain point in all of your life, whether that's your fitness, your finance, whatever, you're going to cap out at a certain point. And this reminds me, one of my favorite basketball coaches I ever had. He was more of one of my basketball one-on-one trainers, a man by the name of Blake Hamilton. And he, if you're from Harrisburg, I don't know how many Harrisburg people listen, but if you're from Harrisburg, you might remember him or know him. And Blake used to always have this quote that he would share that was fear the plateau. And so to us basketball players, he would tell us, when you're going in life, if you're watching me on YouTube, you'll see this, but you kind of grow and go up, and then you kind of plateau, and then you go up, and then you plateau. And this is kind of how, like, if you watch charts on the stock market or Bitcoin or whatever, you see the same thing, right? They kind of go up and even out, go up, even out, sometimes drop back down a little bit. You're going to have natural regressions in life. But he would always tell us, fear the plateau. You should be afraid of hitting that kind of stagnation period, right? You should try to avoid it or make it as short as humanly possible. And we all hit these points in our lives. If you've been on any type of fitness journey, you know you plateau. If you've been in a relationship, any long-term relationship, you know that it can plateau. This is why in Beyond Order, in the second Rules for Life book from Jordan Peterson, he talks about how you have to fight to maintain the romance in your relationship because it doesn't just happen naturally. What happens naturally? The plateau. That happens in every area of life. And so I'm going to talk more about that. I'm probably going to do my Friday episode on that. So I'll save a little bit of that. But just think about that in your own life. Even if you find yourself in a plateau, a time period of stagnation where you're kind of just not feeling life, you're not feeling motivated, you're not feeling like you're growing, then it's time to switch things up. It's time to do things a little bit differently. Similar to how you have to shock your muscles and do some different exercises when you plateau physically. All right, now I want to get into this, what he calls the time management matrix. Dude, this is one of my favorite things. So this is what I was talking about. This is the kind of thing that I had mentioned earlier that I said is one of my favorite things in any book I've ever read. One of my favorite frameworks. All right, so he gives kind of 4 quadrants. And so if you think about this in 4 quadrants on your y-axis, right? So on the left side of the quadrants, you have important up top and not important on the bottom. On the x-axis, you have urgent and not urgent, right? So on the rows, you have important and not important. On your columns, you have urgent and not urgent. And so he basically breaks down and says that, essentially all tasks, all the things you have to do in your life, all your daily tasks, your daily responsibilities, your to-do list, they all fall into one of these 4 categories. He says that you can see here, you have important and urgent, you have important and not urgent, you have not important and urgent, and you have not important and not urgent. So as Catholics, as Christians, because of your sweet, gentle heart that I know that you have, it can be very difficult for you, I'm sure, just like it can be difficult for me, to actually call things not important at all, right? So anything that has to do with people, especially, we feel bad saying that they're not important. When you get to a certain point in your life, you have to start designating things as not important. Somebody random asks you a question about something that is just totally not important, right? Recognizing that might fall into the not important, not urgent. Some of your mail that you get is not important and not urgent and can just be thrown in the trash. Some of the phone calls, somebody's just calling to shoot the shit and they're just calling to just chat it up. That can be important, but oftentimes it's not, right? And you got to kind of define and determine, who in your life are you going to consider on that important list? Because in a certain sense, yes, obviously as Christians, everybody's important. Everybody has inherent value. But you have to start to decide and try to put things into different categories so you can start to say, okay, there's this list of people in my life that can interrupt a meeting, right? If my wife calls me 3 times in a row or it says, please call me back, like this is urgent, I'm dropping. There is nobody or no thing that I'm doing on this earth that's going to stop me from calling her back. Same thing will go for my son when he's older, and any future kids that I have. And then there's certain people that they can interrupt most things, right? But there's certain things that I wouldn't stop doing for the sake of them calling me or whatever. And you kind of work your way down, right? And there's certain times, right? So if my boss calls me during the day, I'm 100% answering the phone, unless I'm on a meeting with like a client or something like that. But if I'm not, then I'm answering. But if it's a Sunday afternoon and my boss calls me and I'm talking in the middle of a conversation with my wife, I'm not necessarily answering that right away. And so there's also different times where different things will fall into different categories. But I want to give some of the examples. So going back up to the important and urgent, he says these are things like crises, pressing problems, deadline driven projects. Not important and urgent are things like interruptions, some mail and some reports, some of your meetings that you have, right? So if you have a meeting, it might not be super important, but you have to be on it, right? It's urgent. Like if the time is coming up, if the time for it has come, then that is something that is considered urgent. It's fallen to the urgent category. Proximate pressing matters, right? Popular activities. So then he goes over to the not important, not urgent. Again, this is like some phone calls, time wasters. This is scrolling on Instagram. This is video games. This is, just anything that you just kind of use to waste time. This doesn't mean they're bad. Just because something's not important and not urgent doesn't mean it's bad, right? You have to enjoy your life and calm the hell down every now and then, right? And relax. And so, watching football on Sunday to me is not important. It's not urgent, but I really enjoy it. And so I'm still going to do it. But the important thing here is as we get into this important and not urgent category. So this is where the life of excellence lies. Here are things that are important and not urgent. These are things he describes here as prevention, relationship building, recognizing new opportunities, planning, and recreation. So there's certain aspects of recreation that are important but not urgent. I would say those are more of the ones that are really like true recreation, right? Like recreating yourself. When you're actually taking time for like active rest for good things. So this can be things to me like reading, things like good conversation and debate. Your prayer life obviously falls into this category. And so you think about the important and not urgent. These are the things that he kind of gets into, and this is why it was such a game changer for me. So those are the second quadrant because quadrants are kind of weird in the way they're numbered. But these second quadrant things, the important and not urgent, these are the things that we often forget to do. And why I say that these are the things where the life of excellence resides is because everything you think about when I talk about the life of excellence, let's just name the big three, right? What do I always say are kind of our three core activities, our three core daily activities: reading, exercise, and praying. All of them are important. All of them are not urgent. There's not a time, there's no deadline on it. Nobody's holding you accountable to it. You can easily not do it, but it's the most important things you do every day. Obviously, that's outside. That's kind of like internal thing, most important internal things you do every day. And then some of the other really important things you do every day: loving your spouse, loving your children, exercising your work. All of these fall into the other 7 pillars, right? So these are also still things in the life of excellence. And so those things sometimes are important and urgent in the way that you have to do them, right? If your kid needs a diaper change or something crazy is happening. But getting your wife flowers is not urgent. Writing them a love note, right? Doing the laundry for them or something like that. There gets a point where it's urgent, but it's just some of those little tasks, right? Like I watered Emily's flowers for her this morning that are out front. And so something like that. It wasn't super urgent at the time. There's other things to do. But some of those little acts of love that you can do for each other are important, but they're not urgent. And so this is the category that you have to be most mindful of, because the urgent shit's always going to get your attention because it's urgent, right? Because you have a deadline, because it's like this needs to get done and needs to get done now. So that's obvious. That's going to get done. The not important and not urgent, who cares if it gets done or not, because it doesn't matter, right? So a lot of that stuff, it's like you don't have to be intentional with it. You're probably wasting too much time in that category as it is. And so you're probably wasting too much time, if you're like me, scrolling. I watch too many reels every day. Watch too much YouTube. I don't watch a ton of TV. thanks to Emily. But there's definitely weekends where we watch too much football, right? You can go overboard even with the things that are good and enjoyable recreation things for you. And so we have to be mindful of that. But when you start to clarify in your life what are the important and not urgent things, you can start to grade yourself on them, which this is, goes into our weekly reviews and things like that I talk about within Seeking Excellence. But you also help to just get clarity in your life of what's most important. So this goes back to the thing that we talked about at the very beginning of the things that are less important should never dominate or take time or take priority over the things that are most important. So this there's a quote in here, or actually I think it was in the last chapter. I can't remember. I don't think I flagged it though when I was going through this today. But there's a quote in this book at some point where it talks about the difference between leadership and management. And in your life, especially when you're single, you have to be both, right? You have to be both a leader and the manager. Within a marriage and a relationship, it helps if you have one person that is the manager and one person that's the leader. Typically, obviously, when we talk about men are supposed to be the leaders of the home, right? You hear that a lot. They're supposed to lead in the relationship. They're supposed to spiritually lead, etc. I think this distinction helps to really understand that. And you can have some overflow, but he defines leadership and management this way, or at least kind of gives the distinction between the two. He says management makes sure that we're doing things right. Leadership makes sure that we're doing the right things. And so leadership, as you can see, is kind of that higher level. It's kind of the 10,000 foot view that makes sure we're really heading in the right direction, as where management is really making sure that we are executing the tasks correctly, right? That we're doing things right each day. So that's making sure that your management in your daily life, if you think about it as an individual, is making sure that you go to bed on time. It's making sure that you're eating good meals, right? You have good nutrition. It's making sure that when you go to the gym, you're not just effing off at the gym, but you're actually having a plan. You have a plan when you go there, you execute that plan, you're staying disciplined to it, etc. Right? So it's staying on track with where you're trying to get to by doing things the right way. Leadership steps back and says, okay, I saw something in the gym yesterday. It broke my heart. This young lady who was working out super hard and she's very, very thin. And that's where you need leadership to step back and say, okay, sometimes you can even be doing good things, but you're doing too much of them, or you're doing them in the wrong way, or you're doing them for the wrong reason, right? So you're overdoing a certain aspect of your life. And that's where leadership, where you start to take a step back and reflect. And this is where habit number 2 comes in, with beginning with the end in mind. And when you have that vision, that's what allows you to actually take a step back and say, okay, what am I actually working towards? And am I actually moving towards what I claim to be working towards? And so that's where I feel like women are typically very good. I know my wife is very good. She's a much better multitasker than I am, better at the day to day. And she's very focused on things that we have to do, upcoming schedule, planning our meals, all that kind of stuff. I am the person that without me, we wouldn't be able to retire, right? Because my wife does not think about what life is going to be like when we're 65. I'm the person in our lives that worked really hard on the Airbnb without making any income for over a year, so that we could get to the point now where we replace my wife's take-home pay with Airbnb income. That's where I think the leadership and management differentiator comes in. And I do think that women are, even just in their people orientation, you hear this a lot when you think about the distinctions between men and women, that women are able to be much more focused and present with someone. This is something that men often can learn from women, a skill they can learn, the active listening skills, being present with the person that's in front of you and not thinking about other things and other tasks. Women typically are better at that than men are. And so that's kind of the being in the present moment women are better at, while men typically are better at kind of the long-term thinking, having a vision, casting a vision. And it's something that men have to be, the skill has to be honed, but there is usually something that's somewhat natural in that, for men that is a little bit less natural in women. Both can do it. Both can be good at both. But yeah, typically you're going to have one or the other that's a little bit better. Another quote here that I love that kind of goes along with this is that the enemy of the best is often the good, right? And so what he basically goes along to say here is he says that you have to decide what your highest priorities are and have the courage, pleasantly, smilingly, non-apologetically, to say no to other things. And the way you do that is by having a bigger yes burning inside. And so remember that every yes requires other no's, right? So when you say yes to things, you're saying no to something. In order to say no, you need to have that deeper yes. And so what that means is this is a hard thing for me to do, man. I am really not good at this, at saying no to people, and I get asked to do a lot of freaking stuff. And I think there's even a lot of times, sometimes, especially when it comes to like speaking and being Catholic and seeing it as ministry, but also seeing it as a way that I provide for my family. There's times where when somebody asks me how much can I pay you, or how much do you require or cost to give this or that talk, where I definitely undersell myself often, and I feel like I do that out of goodwill. I do that out of the fact that we're pretty comfortable as a family, but there's certain aspects of it where you have to be willing to do that, especially within ministry, certain things where you have to say yes, right? There's certain times where God's asking you to do things through other people and he wants you to say yes. There's also other times where God's asking you to do something else and he needs you to focus. And it's just your feelings and emotions that are making you say yes to somebody, that are actually distracting you and taking you away from what God's asking you to do. And so we have to keep that in mind as well, because that's a very real thing that we often struggle with. And so that's what I think this means here, is the enemy of the best is often the good. And so for me, what I'm currently going through in my life, just to be a little transparent with you, is just figuring out with seeking excellence, right? I'm always trying to work it out, to think about, God, they're asking me to do this volunteer thing at church and this volunteer thing at church, and work is asking me for more of my time and to take on more responsibility, etc. Friends always wanting to hang out, people wanting to do things, all of which are a blessing. It's a blessing to be good at your job and to have your company want to give you more responsibility. It's a blessing to have a church and a parish and a pastor who wants you to do more things and be more involved in ministering to other people. It's a blessing to have a family. It's a blessing to have friends that want to hang out with you. At the same time, all that is good. At the same time, God has given me, I think, and I've discerned for the last 15 years of my life, damn near, that God has called me to do something here with Seeking Excellence. That he's called me to be consistent. He's called me to share this message. He's called me to help people apply faith and reason in everyday life, to give them practical tips and guidance, to take you on this journey that I'm on with you, of pursuing a life of excellence and seeing what comes of it, right? To seeing how hard it is, to seeing what we learn about how to do it better. We're on this journey together. And that requires sometimes for me to say no to certain things. I had to say no to coaching basketball this year, even though I loved it last year. I had a lot of fun doing it. And what I'm trying to do, my plan for 2024 is, I feel like I've been kind of unfair to myself, because I still, even though, we have our local supporters and things like that, all of that money goes to other people. And so currently, and I'm underpaying all of them, right? So I have somebody who edits my writing. I have somebody who and uploads the articles on Locals. I have somebody who edits the podcast, does the audio editing for it. I have someone who does the video editing for the videos that we upload to YouTube and Spotify and things like that. I have somebody else who helps me just kind of project manage all these kind of different things that are happening and stuff. And so I don't actively make any money. I actually lose money on it. I'm still, even though we have so many supporters, and I'm so grateful for all of you who have joined as supporters. You can join us on Locals for as little as $10 a month. If you listen to the podcast regularly, I encourage you to discern doing that, because this is how we continue going. This is how we're going to grow the podcast. This is how I try to give you things in return for that, right? I'm not just asking you for money just for out of goodwill or for me to go serve somebody else. I'm trying to do this to serve you better, so I can create better content for you, so I can have better equipment, better quality, get better guests on, and things like that. That is the goal, and that is my mission. And so I've been kind of unfair to myself in the fact that I've been doing Seeking Excellence as kind of my main, what I view as my ministry in life. And at the same time, I still am doing a bunch of other shit for free and volunteer work, right? And it doesn't mean that it's bad, right? It doesn't mean it's bad to be involved. And there's certain things that are easy to do, like lecturing or things like that are involved at Mass or places that I'm already going to be, right? Happy to help in any way that I can at things I'm already going to be at. But do I have to, on top of that, feel bad about saying no to coaching basketball and saying no to being on the core team for youth group while I'm also doing volunteer work with RCIA every week? No, I don't. And a lot of you are in the same boat, or maybe you feel like God's calling you to do something and you're saying yes to all these other things that are taking you away from what God is calling you to do and what God's asking you to do. Sometimes that's not even a mission or a task like seeking excellence is, but it's just that your prayer life is suffering because you just say yes to so much other stuff, right? You're not actually praying, reading, and exercising. You're not actually fulfilling your potential, becoming the best version of yourself, because you're just saying yes to so many other things that are good, but they're taking away from the best. They're good, but they're taking away from your greatness. And that's where you have to balance this stuff out. And you have to say, okay, these other things are important, or they're moderately important, or they're not important, but this is the most important thing. And what is the most important thing in your life? For me, I recognize that my most important thing is my family. I got to provide for my family. That's big in my responsibility as a husband and father. But then next after that, I truly believe that the next most important thing in this phase of my life, in this growing phase of seeking excellence, I'm now 3 years into this, really trying to grow the locals channel. I'm trying to grow YouTube, trying to grow on social media. And ultimately, I just want to get really, really good at this, because I think there's going to be a time where God's going to give me a bigger platform. He continues to put me in front of people to speak live. And I've gotten so much better at doing that because of podcasting. And so I'm really just in this phase, while I'm not getting paid for it, just honing my skill to be really, really good. In case God does want me to do this full time someday, I want to be the best I can be at it. I want to be the best content creator in the Catholic space. I want to be the best thinker that I can be in the Catholic space. I don't want to just, as I've said before, I don't want to be a Catholic speaker. I want to be a Catholic thinker. I think the Catholic speakers crush 3 to 7 talks that they've written, and they give it over and over and over again. I want to be somebody that is a thinker. I think of Jordan Peterson as a thinker, where he can go and he shares profound thoughts and revelations and breakthroughs that he's having on a wide range of different topics and issues. That's what I want to be. I want to be well-rounded in that way and be able to talk about a wide variety of different things. And that requires a lot of time and a lot of effort. And so I'm putting in this, I'm digging and trying to build this foundation within myself and in the infrastructure of seeking excellence, so that when it's time to grow, when things are starting to take off, if that's what God wants, if he doesn't, if it just stays at 300 people or whatever, listening to the episodes, 500 people, 700 people, 1,000 people listen to the episodes. I've been everywhere in that range, right? Starting off with 50 people listening up to episodes with 1,000 listeners, growing much, much slower than many other Catholic podcasts, especially women's podcasts. And that's fine. I'll do it for a certain period of time. If God pulls the plug and says, hey, I don't want you to do this anymore, roger that, we'll stop. And I don't plan to stop until he says that. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what growth occurs. But you guys that have joined on Locals, just to give you another shout out to the local supporters. I wouldn't be able to do the video content, the things that we're on the verge of doing now, whether that be with book club or that be with video content or just kind of this upgrade and stuff that we've had. I also wouldn't be as inspired, because it's the local supporters that believe in it enough to even just put in something that's as minuscule as $10 a month. I support a lot of different organizations, a lot of different things. I've given to many focus missionaries and stuff over the years. And so I recognize, having given tens of thousands of dollars away to missionaries, what it means to believe in something that somebody's doing, right? And to think, even if it's not something that you believe in for the sake of the mission work that they're doing. I've also supported organizations and podcasts and content creators, because I benefited so much from the work they were doing that I was happy to support them financially. And so even just knowing there's only 26 supporters on Locals right now, but even knowing that there's 26 people that feel that way is really moving. And so I'm really grateful for that. I know last year there were some 200 people that Seeking Excellence was the most listened to podcast for them. And so I'm hopeful that those of you that Seeking Excellence is your most listened to podcast, or you come back here regularly, that if you have $10 to give a month, you'll do that so we can continue to grow and expand. Now, let's see a couple other things here. So I have 2 other notes, but I think I might skip one of them to jump ahead here to this last thing that I wanted to share, and then we'll close it out. So this part here, so this is really important. So this kind of goes back to that male-female divide, and this is something that men, we probably have to grow at and get a little bit better at. And this is understanding the reality that people are more important than things. And so he talks about how he tried at certain points in his life to be efficient with people. And he says that you simply can't think of efficiency with people. Covey says, you think effectiveness with people and efficiency with things. He said, I tried to be efficient with a disagreeing or disagreeable person, and it simply doesn't work. I've tried to give 10 minutes of quality time to a child or an employee to solve a problem, only to discover that such quote unquote efficiency creates new problems and seldom resolves the deepest concern. So I think this is great. You have to think about this. Matthew Kelly talks about this in regards to parenting and family life in general and relationships in general, that we need carefree timelessness. I love that quote from Matthew Kelly, man. Carefree timelessness. That's where true bonds, true relationships are developed. That's where they're built. It's just in spending time with people where you don't have to worry about a schedule. You don't have to worry about what you have to do next. You don't have to run off to the next thing you've got going on. You can just spend time with each other, live and be present with one another. I think about this. I was last night, Emily went out to run an errand, and I just laid with Jordan on our bed for a while. Talked with him, tickled him, sang to him, was messing with him. And that's what it's all about, right? That's where, he's just looking at me, I'm looking at him, and we're just chilling together. Me and Emily like to do that, whether that's eating dinner together or going on a walk together. But you have to have that time. And if you don't have that time, that's where your relationships start to degrade. And I think in business and, when you get to the busyness of life, it can extend outside of your work life, where you just try to be efficient with people, where you just try to get on and off the phone with people really quick or whatever. And this can be a difficult thing, right? Because there's times for that. There's times where you just have no option but to be a little bit quicker, but to be a little bit more efficient with your time, to have a quick phone call with somebody. Because there can be a certain point where you stop doing good things, like calling your family, like whatever, unless you have 2 hours, right? And so we have to be mindful of that as well, because some people just want so much from others. And I've had this problem in my own life where I feel like people always want more of me than I'm able to give. And this goes back to the example of needing to say no to certain things, right? And that's where you have to start to prioritize, because I recognize that I can't be efficient with people. So this means that when I have guys in the local Denver area that say, hey, man, I'd love to get a beer with you or coffee with you sometime and pick your brain, or just like hear your thoughts on some things I'm working through in my life. I love doing those things. I have to be careful about doing those things at the expense of my family time. Because if I start doing those things every day, then I'm starting to take away from my primary vocation in my life. And that's not fair to my wife or my son. And so I can't do it. I can't be with everybody, right? I can't meet with a different guy every day and work for 9-10 hours a day and call my family a different family member every day and catch up with a different friend every day and still have carefree time with my wife and my son. Especially considering that in, I think, an ideal family setup, you have time for your kids. And then after they go to bed, you have time as a husband and wife as well. And so you can't do it all, right? And so you have to, this is where the prioritization of certain things is it important for me to meet with those guys? Yes, but it's less important than me spending time with my wife. It's less important than me getting my prayer time in. So I have to think, okay, if God, you want me to do all these things, then maybe God's calling me to sleep less, right? Maybe it's that, okay, homie, I can meet with you. My son doesn't wake up till about 8:00 anyways, some days. And so I can meet with you for coffee before work. Emily likes to sleep in sometimes, so I'll just let her sleep in. I'll leave at 6:15. And instead of going after work, where I would be cutting into some family time, I'll go and meet with you before work. And then I got to figure out and reprioritize. Am I going to wake up even earlier to pray beforehand, or am I going to pray after work or during work or whatever? And so this is just how you have to kind of work it out. But you can't, again, going back to the quote that we kind of started with, I think this is a good kind of thing to wrap up with, is you can't be great and be comfortable. Right? And I think that's where, when we talk about getting these important and urgent things and all these different categories, right? We talk about fitting all this stuff in and getting all these things done. You just can't do it and be comfortable. You can't be excellent and think life is going to be easy, because excellence is hard. Work is hard. I just recorded with Alex Jones. This episode might be coming out this week, the same week this will come out. But one thing we talked about is just the fact that prayer is hard. But we go into so many different things, so many different areas of our lives, and so many different areas where we want excellence or we want greatness, and we think that it's just going to be easy. Going to the gym for the first time, trying to, even for me, reading. Dude, I was a bad reader. I was dumb as hell in high school when it came to reading, dude. I used to take those tests, the standardized tests on that stuff. Guys, I used to take those and I would read, you know how you had like it was like, a page, like two columns you read on the left-hand side of the page, questions on the right-hand side. I used to literally read the left side of the page and then go to the right side page and they'd ask a question like, did Johnny have this or that? Or, some question that I just read it. And I'd be like, when the hell did they mention Johnny? You know what I mean? Dude, I was dumb. And so it took me a long time. And I'm still a very slow reader. Emily makes fun of me all the time if we're reading something or looking at a reel together. Like, I'm like, whoa, 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 go back. I didn't finish. Emily must read twice as fast as me. And I read probably, especially when we first met. I don't know about now. I haven't been crushing this year as much. I think I've only read like 15 books this year. Trying to finish this last quarter pretty strong. But I mean, when we first met, I was reading 10 times, 5 to 10 times as many books as Emily, but it was painstaking, right? Because it took me a long time. I was reading really slow. And so just because you're bad at something doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't take time to figure it out, grow, whether it's listening to Audible. I listen to audio books and I read physical books. And I remember doing my leadership program in the Rockies this past year, man. Even just looking at Atlas Shrugged, I was like, yo, I don't think I could read this. I don't read books that are more than usually 200 to 300 pages because I'm like, it takes me so long. It's just like discouraging, right? I just get started and I'm just like discouraged because I'm like, this is taking forever. Or books with really big pages where it takes me 3 minutes to read a whole page. It's terrible. But just because you're bad at something doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And it's not going to be easy. And we have to recognize, going back to that first quote I read from the book, that if we're going to be successful in life, we have to be willing to do things that unsuccessful people won't do. And that's how I think about, going back to the podcasting example is I'm like, most people aren't willing to put out 2 episodes a week, let alone 3 episodes a week. Some people are starting podcasts and putting out episodes every other week. Why? Because it's intimidating. Why? Because I get on here and I'm like, I don't know if I said this already, or if I recently said this, or I said this in some podcast. Because I'm doing so many, I don't even know what the hell I'm talking about. I say so many different things and I overlap and things like that, and it can be embarrassing or whatever, but who cares? Right? Don't let the good be the enemy of the best. And the best thing to do, the best way I'm going to get my 10,000 hours in, if I'm going to be an excellent, outstanding speaker by the time I'm thinking about when I'm 40, right? I always tell people that I'm like, if I'm going to do Seeking Excellence full time, it's probably going to be when I'm 40. Unless something crazy happened in the next like 5 to 8 years, you know what I mean? Like, this is a long-term plan. Like, so that's why I don't even trip, right? I know there's a lot more than 26 of you listen to the podcast, but only 26 have joined as local supporters. This is a long-term game for me. This is not something that I'm in just for, the next 3 months or whatever. Maybe that's why you're hesitating to put in. But guys, I've been doing this for 3 years. I've been doing it for 3 years, and I just did a big upgrade. I just invested a whole bunch more money into it to take things to the next level. So this is not something that's going to be over with anytime soon. We're going to do this for a long time. And so that's the mentality you have to have as well. Is say you're trying to lose weight, say you're trying to get better at reading, say you're trying to figure out how to pray. A lot of you are giving up because you're just starting out and you suck at this, but you're not giving yourself time to actually be good. Right? This is one of the best things I think came from the podcast with Alex, was he talked about how this was crazy. My man was agnostic and he's like, I'm gonna pray every day for 2 years. And if nothing happens after 2 years, then I'll know God's a fraud, right? God doesn't exist and I can go about my life. 2 years, bro. That's the same thing. He's like, that's how long it takes to be even remotely decent at golf. So I figured if it takes 2 years to be good at golf, it probably takes 2 years to be good at praying. But a lot of y'all are giving up after a week. You tried working out for a month and didn't see results, so you gave up. See, that's not what we're here for. That type of mentality, that bullshit is out the window. We're not doing that anymore. And that's why, some episodes like this are less popular than when I talk about spicy shit, when I talk about BLM, when I talk about, fundraising your salary, when I talk about whatever. Those always get more listens and downloads. But this, to me, like, this is what we're really here for. Yes, I think it's important. I think I had important messages. The fundraising your salary was not just for clicks. I think there was important things that I brought up in that episode that I'm glad I brought up and I think was worthwhile. But that episode is not more impactful for your life than this is. Than understanding that you have things that are important and not urgent, and that you have to fit those things into your life, or else you're going to be unsuccessful in the long run. That's a much more important message. And so those other things are also under the 7 pillars, are also relevant and important stuff. But these ones that get less clicks and things like that, I don't really care about that, because what we're here for is I'm trying to change your life, and I'm trying to impact your life in a positive way that's going to be deep and lasting, not just give you something that is freeing and kind of helps you put words to some of the frustrations you've had with Focus or the Culture Project or whatever it is. All that stuff is good and well. But guys, what we really need to get down to if we're going to have long-lasting change and internal change is we have to be focused on these types of things, of applying these principles of success to our lives. And that's how we're going to live a life of excellence. That's why we're going to be going into book club. I don't give a damn if 2 people show up every week. We're going to be doing book club, and we're going to be going deep into that, because that's the kind of stuff that changes people's lives. It leaves a lasting impact in your life. And I don't just do that for money. I don't make any money doing it or whatever. I'm doing this because I think this is what God has called me to do. And so we're going to be taking things to the next level. I hope you're on board with that. I hope you're excited about that. I hope you're going to be going on this journey with me. I hope that if you listen to today's episode and you haven't listened to the previous 2, you'll go back and listen to those, because these things do really build on top of one another. And so you have to be going through them and joining in for some of these series and things that we're doing, because this is the important stuff. This is the stuff that I hope that whatever tidbit or moment or quote that I read today or quote that I said, that you take to prayer, that you take and start to implement and think about in your own life of like, man, how am I actually prioritizing things? How am I doing with X, Y, or Z? And start to evaluate yourself on these topics, because this is the stuff that's going to be important. This is how we're going to start to actually build our community, build an army of excellence, of people who are truly striving to live an excellent life. And when we do that, that's how we're going to start to change the world. And I think that's how we're going to have people who are going to be ready to actually rebuild the church, because they're not going to have just some shallow faith that's been watered down through Protestantism and weak and soft and afraid and cowardly Catholics. We're going to be bold. We're going to be formed. We're going to be excellent. And because we're excellent, because we're successful, our lives are going to be appealing to the other people in our lives, the other people around us. And our excellence is going to either inspire them to strive for excellence and greatness themselves, or it's going to just, they're going to choose to stay in their lukewarmness, stay in mediocrity or worse. And that's going to be their decision. But if they do choose to try to pursue excellence ourselves, we're going to be well equipped and well formed to help bring them along with us. So if you're ready to take the next step and go deeper into that, and you want to join us for book club that's coming up here very soon, because this week I'm shipping everything out and we're going to start in a couple weeks. I probably start in November, the first week in November. Really leaning towards, just for some context and preparation, Tuesday afternoons, probably Tuesday afternoon around 4 p.m. Mountain time. And so 6 p.m. Eastern time. And we'll be doing a live Zoom call every week during that time period. And it's going to be awesome. I'm going to give a little presentation on the chapter from that week, and then we're going to talk about it as a group. And it's going to be amazing. And we're going to have some life-changing stuff that's going to come from there. We're going to pray together. We're going to apply this to our spiritual lives and other areas of our lives. And we're going to truly become a community of excellence. And this is just the beginning. There's going to be a lot more that's coming down the road. I'm super excited about all of it. I'm as inspired and fired up about seeking excellence as I've ever been in my entire life. So if you'd like to join us for that, you can join us at seekingexcellence.locals.com. You know where it's going to be. It's going to be in the show notes. You can also subscribe on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do. I have another goal for that by the end of the year that I'm trying to hit. We're going to be chunking up these long form podcasts into shorter videos as well. And so you will be able to share specific parts of the podcast with other people that might not listen to a full hour, but maybe 10 minutes of this would really have a big impact on their lives. And so you'll be able to do that. And yeah, that's all I've got for you today. So as always, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. If this was impactful for you, share it with somebody else. Leave us a review on the podcast. Most importantly, be your best. God bless you.